You are a prison. Yes, I said you are a prison. I did not say you are in a prison. And the main reason I am creating this video is because, once again, if we do not know who we are, we will live as if we are in a prison without walls that we cannot see. So with that being said, if you guys take a look at the thumbnail, there's a photo of a guy in a cage, basically in jail, if I may say. And then there's a police officer or someone guarding, or a prison guard guarding that prison cell. And that is exactly what is going on with most of us today. We are living in a self-made mental prison that we have constructed with our minds, but we have no idea that we are actually incarcerated in a false reality. So most of you guys by now know that the main topics that I usually speak about is in reference to knowing thyself. And this video is also crucial because I'm going to go into some of the details as to why, uh, what is important to understand, and how this will affect your life as well. If having the understanding that you are in a prison without your awareness, then you could make further, more better, beneficial decisions because you understand what reality really is. So with that being said, all of us were born in this prison, this place we call the Matrix. In the East, it's called Samsara, the illusion. And all of us at birth were not aware that we were born in this prison. I don't know how many of you guys know about Plato's cave. That would be a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Plato's cave. There was individuals who was born in the cave, and they was pretty much had their they were bound pretty much in front of a screen, and the only thing they saw was the shadows, and they thought that the shadows were real. However, one individual broke away, and he came back to let the individuals know that the shadows was not reality, because the individual came out of the cave and went and saw the real reality, the real world for what it is, and he came back to, if I may use the word, enlighten those beings. However, those beings rejected that truth because the only thing they knew was being in jail, or in the cave, if I may say. And that is exactly what is going on with most of us, many of us today. We do not realize that the reality that we were born in, the illusory reality, is a construct of the mind. And what happens is, most individuals, because we are not aware of this, we believe, again, because of the root cause, not knowing who we are, we believe that we are real per se. We believe that the false self is the true self, the false illusory non-self is the primary core self, and we believe that to be who we are. However, because of this belief, we tend to look through the lens of the physical finite mind eyes, and we see a world and we assume that the world is also concrete as well. However, this delusion of seeing the world as being the primary or the fundamental reality externally is somewhat incorrect. Yes, it is a reality from the external world, from the finite mind's perspective. The world is real, it does exist. However, from the infinite mind's perspective, it is all an appearance. And if this is not making any sense, please go ahead and watch some of my videos. Who am I? Specifically, who am I? That would be a great video to start with. And that also would add some solidity to what I am saying. Because again, most individuals might have just started to come across this type of information, and it may seem foreign to many. However, again, this is because we were born, most of us were born, or many of us, I shouldn't say most of us, but many of us who were born in the Western cultures, we tend to not be too familiar with some of the things that I may be saying thus far. However, back to what I was saying, because of this false self, this illusory self, not knowing who we are, that self itself is the prison. You are the prison guard, you are the judge, you are the jury, you are all of these things. And throughout the world, there are many, many, many very harsh prisons, difficult, you might say almost impossible to escape. However, there is a possibility to escape most of those prisons. But this prison is one of the most difficult prisons to escape from that ever existed. And the reason is because this is all we know. When we were born, we opened our eyes and we saw the world and we saw our family, we saw our friends, we saw everybody else participating in this illusory, this Maya, the matrix per se. And so we automatically assume that this is the fundamental reality. So it is not anybody's fault if they do not believe otherwise, because that was the purpose of the illusion. To come into the illusion would have not been an easy task just to understand. I too always did not have this understanding of this nature of reality in the beginning as well. I too believed that I was a solid, fixed, unchanging entity. I too believe that the earth, the world, and everything that I see around me, the appearances, I too believe that they were fundamental and they were unchanging, and that is all reality existed of at one point in my life as well. However, as time went on and my understanding and my knowledge, wisdom, and understanding grew, and as I came to understand the true nature of reality, basically because of coming to really know who I am, that was the root cause, the catalyst that basically brought the house of cards down. So that is what this video is about today. Getting an understanding that the reality of the false self is the root cause and is the prison that imprisons the true self. And without the understanding of the true self, the I-ness, the isness, the consciousness, the pure awareness that you are, you will always be imprisoned by the false self. And that is the design by its nature to keep us in prison without ever coming to reality and accepting and knowing reality for what it is. That is why one of the scriptures, if I remember clearly, it was Joshua, yes, Jesus said, be transformed by the renewing of the mind. And however, the only way the mind can be transformed is through understanding, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding through self-inquiry, through self-evaluation, by coming to know one's true self for what one true self really is. But until then, like I said, it is next to impossible to break free from this illusory reality, the self that is imprisoned, the self is that is imprisoned. It is not actually imprisoned per se, it is perceived to be imprisoned because the false self job is to keep it imprisoned. The false ego does not want to give up being priority in our lives. The false self does not want to give up its position as the Lord God that created all. The ego is the one that does not want the true self to be revealed. So again, it's not like you are in a prison, you are the prison itself. The person that you call I, the person that you call you are the prison that has your true self imprisoned. And this false self I, this you that you think that you are, again, the only solution to break free from this prison is to know who you are. And eventually the chains, the delusions, and the imagination of the reality that really exists will come to fruition, and the false reality, the chains, the walls, the bars of the false illusory prison that you are trapped in will dissolve as well. And eventually they will actually dissipate and you will disappear. They will disappear and you will come back to being your true, natural, normal, free self. However, just because you came out of prison, that does not mean that the world will disappear. However, your understanding of the world and who you are will have a lot more clarity. Therefore, again, one of the main reasons we are so uh, bound to this illusory prison that we have ourselves trapped in is because of attachments. All of the attachments that we are attached to in this world are keeping us bound in this samsara. The attachments, the desires, the lust, the greed, all of these things. And the reason these attachments exist is because we do not, once again, know who we are. Because if we know who we are, we would not be so attached. And there is no other option than to be attached when you are attached to a false self. So therefore, the false self does not know the true self. So the false self always misleads the individuals, telling them that, hey, if you get this thing, this external thing, you will be happy, you will be free. If you acquire this or that thing, you will be happy. If you get in a relationship with this person or you get that job, you will be free. I will release you from your bondage. However, as we all know by now, we are never, ever, ever released once we achieve the goals that we have achieved. And for those of us also, please go and watch my video, Life Has No Purpose. That video also uh, talks a lot about what I'm talking about as well. So again, the false self keeps us in the prison because it believes that if you find out who you truly are, it will no longer exist. Just like the thumbnail, the security guard or the prison officer, he knows that if crime does not exist, he knows that if no one goes to jail, he would not have a job. Also, that applies to the judge, the correction officers, the probation officers, anyone who keeps charge and check of criminals. They know that if there is no crime, they will not have a job. And I'm just giving this as an illustration. I'm not saying that we do not need judges and we do not need police officers. I am saying that their job is based on crime. If there was no thieves, no theft, there would never be any securities. There would never be any security cameras. There would never be any type of surveillance. However, because of theft, that is why buildings, houses, and people have security cameras in their facilities, protecting their property and other things as well. So again, without these things, there would not be a need for a police or a security officer. And that same thing applies to the ego. The false self knows that if the false self knows that if you find out who and what you truly are, the ego knows that it will die and it will not have a job ever again. So the ego will do everything in its power to keep you in the prison that only you can break free out of. No pastor, no priest, no prophet, no one can break you from this prison but yourself. Only you have to come to the conclusion to realize you are in a prison. So the first step is to actually know that you are in a prison, because most of us, we do not know we are in a prison. We are living comfortably in the prison thinking that we are free. 99.999% of us in the world believes we are free. However, when we evaluate our lives, we know that we are not free because we cannot stop doing what we are doing. We cannot leave our jobs. We cannot leave our relationships. We cannot stop doing the things that we most likely, in many cases, do not want to continue doing, but we cannot do it. We cannot stop. That is why we are not free. And we know it as well. We know that we will always be bound to having to do certain things because that is the way life really is. So despite the fact how free you may feel to be, you are not actually free. As long as you do not know who you are, I do not care how much money you have. I don't care how whatever it may be, physically attractive, whatever it may be, you will never be free. You will never taste the taste of freedom if you do not know who you are. So again, this false self, its job is to keep you in prison. That is its only job, and it knows that if you ever one day come to the conclusion that, hey, I am not this false self. I am not my feelings. I am not my body. I am not my job. I am not my emotions. I am not my thoughts. I am not my money. I am not my career. I am not my looks. I am not any of these things. And if you ever come to that conclusion, the false self, the ego, is dead. And the prison gates will dissolve, they will melt away like butter. And there will be no more reason to be in fear, worrying about this and worrying about that, because you know that the only things that are happening around you are all perceptions. All of the emotional, psychological, physical problems, and all of these things that have kept you trapped in bondage, those feelings will dissipate and disappear as well. And I am not saying that there will be no pain. However, we are not trying to stop pain. The goal here is to eliminate suffering. That is the root cause of knowing thyself, knowing suffering. Like I said before, maybe I've not said the actual meaning of suffering. However, one meaning of suffering is basically to not want to accept reality, something that exists the way it is for what it is. Basically, you are not happy with something and you are not accepting something as reality the way it is. And that is the root cause of suffering. However, when we come to the realization to know who we are, then only then we can eliminate the root cause of suffering, because we would know that all of these external things that may be appearing to happen to us, they are not happening to us at all, because the true self is a neutral thing. It is like the screen, it is like the sky, which everything appears on, but it does not affect you at all. The true self, the I amness, the isness, and that is what we are talking about today. That is who we are trying to let free out of this false illusory jail. And after that false self has come to the conclusion that, hey, I am just nothing more than the wind, that will release you from being in bondage and being in prison. So the prison that you are in was created by you and is you. And when I say you, again, I am not talking about the true you, the pure consciousness, the awareness that you really are. I am talking about the false you, the identities that you have, the labels that you have given yourself. I am a teacher, I am a carpenter, I am a plumber, I am a barber, I am a mother, I am a husband, I am a boyfriend, I am a aunt, I am a uncle. Those are all labels, all nouns, places, things, and all of these things we tend to believe that we are these things. Our ideas, abstract ideas, we feel that we are happy, we are sad. None of these things are us at all. All of these things are ever changing and never ever consistently, persistently permanent. However, because we do not know who we are, these things keep us in bondage. I am financially broke. No, you are not. You are not financially broke, because there is no you per se to be financially broke. The illusory false self may be broke, which was bring me to another topic. So we do not understand the layers of the mind. The mind, we have the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind. There are many different layers, the superconscious mind, the preconscious mind, all of these different layers. However, we are talking about the elementary concept of the mind, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind. The conscious mind is what we tend to believe is the true mind. The conscious mind is what we tend to believe is the ultimate mind. We tend to look at the things in the world, our feelings, the things that we can see, things that we can feel, the things that we can taste, the things that we can touch with our five senses, what we can smell, what we can hear. We tend to believe that these things are the real reality. However, then we tend to look secondary. We tend to look at the conscious mind as primary. Then we may say, well, the unconscious mind is more important, is less important. And then we say the subconscious mind is even more or less important or not important at all. However, that we tend to have this backwards. We tend to look at consciousness being the fundamental reality. Then we say unconsciousness is not so important. Then we say the subconscious mind is just unimportant altogether. That is incorrect. Just like saying most of us think that being the wake state is more important than the dream state, and then we think the deep sleep state is not important at all. So excuse me, so we tend to look at reality backwards. What if it was backwards? What if the deep sleep state, the state of nothingness, was the primary state, and then the dream state was the second most important state, and the last state there is the conscious state. So we are imprisoned looking at the reality that we were born in. From a fundamental perspective, we are looking at the fundamental reality as being the primary reality, but we are actually looking at things backwards. We are thinking that the reality is more important than the unconscious mind. We are looking at the reality more important than the subconscious mind. However, it is backwards. What if, again, just like being awake is the dream state, and being in the deep sleep is the actual reality? What if it was reversed? When we wake up in the morning and we go around to do our things, we tend to believe that this is the reality. However, when we go to sleep and we go into deep sleep, we say that, hey, that's not the reality. But what if we are incorrect? What if our daily lives, waking, walking, talking, doing all of these things, what if these things are actually the illusion? And that is the conclusion what you will come to once you have come to understand and know who you truly are, the true self, the I-ness, the isness, the consciousness that you truly are. And that is what I'm talking about here today, trying to break free from this false illusory self. And the only way, again, that can be achieved if we come to know oneself for who oneself really is. And we might say, well, yes, there might be no benefits, and some people might be afraid, but there is a lot of benefits why you will be to come to this conclusion, because again, you will be free. You will be free from all captivity. You will be free from bondage, mental, psychological, emotional. You would, for once in your life, see life for what it really is. And that is what they would call, from a spiritual perspective, to actually be born again. So you don't actually need to actually go to a particular pastor, priest, prophet, or whoever the case may be to come to this realization, because the only person who can do this for you is you. For example, most individuals might not be aware of the concept of the false self. There's something even greater than this false self that we believe to be true. When we look at, there's something what we call spiritual. This is actually a Buddhist concept that is called spiritual materialism. And most individuals might not be aware of this concept. Most individuals might believe that the concept of achieving material things is the only thing that we can accumulate. However, there is also something called spiritual materialism. And that spiritual materialism is something that when we try to break free from this illusory self, the ego is such a crafty culprit, per se. It will do anything to keep you in the dark. For example, most individuals, when they tend to want to break free from this false illusory self, one of the first things they tend to go into is religion. They would look at religion as the solution. However, the false self, the ego, is such a crafty, again, culprit. It will use anything to keep you in bondage, anything that could keep you. It even will use God. It will use anything that it could think of to constantly leave you in the dark. So, for example, you might go and say, hey, okay, I'm going to go and become a Christian, a Buddhist, a Hindu, or whatever the case may be. Again, however, without knowing the true self, who you truly are, it is most likely you will still be in bondage. Because again, without understanding who you are, first and foremost, you will not be free, even if you pick up some type of religion. Because what the ego does, what the false self does, it uses that belief system that you may now just acquired. Say, for example, you are a Christian. There's always going to be an I. I am a Christian. I am a Buddhist. I am a Rastafarianism. I am a Hindu. I am a Mormon. I. If you guys notice, what I'm saying is the I still exists. Even after you have gone and entered into a relationship with some type of religion, you are still saying I this, I that. So the ego now, instead of accumulating material, physical things, now the ego has you accumulating spiritual things. So now you say, okay, I am going to church every day, every other day, 3 days, 4 days, 6 days a week. Now the ego makes you feel, okay, I am better than this other churchgoer because they only show up to church once a year. They only show up once in a while. They do not pay tithes. They do not pay for this. They do not pay tithes as much as I do. They do not do the things that I do. And that is what I am saying. Even the things that we do spiritually, we tend to believe that we are accumulating spiritual knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. However, the ego is also using these things against us and making us feel like we are achieving spiritual gains. However, it is still not letting us know that the I still exists. So again, what we tend to do, we believe that we are paying tithes. We believe that we are going to church. We believe that we are going to prayer meeting. And so therefore the only person that's doing these things is the I. So all of our spiritual acts are now being accumulated, but we are still trapped in the false illusory self, the false world, the Maya, the matrix. We still do not come to the conclusion to know who we truly are. So only thing we're doing now, we went from being more ego, more physical type of thing, but however, then we went into a more spiritual ego, having more spiritual ego. I pay more tithes than you. I attend more church than you. I sing in the church choir. I I do prayer meetings more than you. I. The situation is always the I. So until that I actually transpires and actually dissipates with the understanding, only with the understanding, then the true self can actually be revealed. So until that happens, the false self will always be the winner. So after again we have come to the conclusion that yes, we're gonna go into some type of spiritual realm, some spiritual understanding. That too is also a trap. Until the I, the true self, the true self is revealed, we will just trade in one ego for another, from the physical ego to the spiritual ego, and that is what is going to happen. We are going to constantly believe the false self to be true, because again, no matter what you do, the ego does not, I repeat, the ego does not want to dissolve itself. So be careful for, again, it is called spiritual materialism. I think it was some Tibetan monk, if I remember clearly. I'm not, don't hold me to it, but I think he was the one who coined the term. It is an actual term. You guys could go look it up. Spiritual materialism, again, being the opposite of physical materialism. Physical materialism is basically accumulating objects, cars, houses, money, finances, things of that sort. That is what material, uh, material physical materialism is, but now we're talking about spiritual materialism, basically accumulating a bunch of spiritual things, but still not being aware of who and what we truly are. So that is what we are talking about here today, trying to get an understanding of the depths of all the aspects we need to cover, because this prison cell is not an easy task to escape from, because the prison cell was designed by you at all costs, and it does not care who you are. Its main goal is to keep the true self entrapped, enslaved, and it do matter what. Even you now, this if we understand the spiritual materialism from that perspective, even our good deeds, we could be working for the shelter. We could be. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with working for the shelter. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with doing good deeds. However, again, if we do not come to the true realization of who we are, we will just be trapped, basically rubbing sweetness onto dirt, if I may say. We still don't understand that we are the false self. So if we could go and do charity work, and the ego will still be there saying, oh, I do charity work. And we still will look at others who do not do charity work as being less inferior than us. Oh, my church is this, my church is that. Oh, my mosque is this. Oh, my belief is that. I serve the poor. I do this and I do that. Yes, these are all great things. Yes, these are all good things. I am not saying that we should not do these things. However, what I am saying is that these things are all still secondary until we come to the true understanding of who we are. So please take a look at this spiritual materialism, and this would be one of the last levels, if I may say, that needs to also be broken or be aware of, because again, you could be out there doing a bunch of things, doing a bunch of good works, trying to earn your way into heaven, if I may say, and however, that will also not, you would not achieve that goal, because you also will be basically just adding another layer of illusion on the false self. I am doing charity work. I am helping the poor. I am helping the needy. I am helping the sick. I. As long as that I exist in your vocabulary, there is always going to be suffering, because the false self is always going to be seeking some type of reward. The false self is always going to be wanting to get some type of recognition for whatever it does. And that is why if we are doing things from the false self perspective, there will always be some type of disappointment. I am doing all of this work, but I am not getting any reward. I am doing this, but I'm not getting any praise. I am doing that, but I'm not getting this or that. And that again is because of the false self believing itself to be the one doing these things when there is no false self that exists at all. That is why we need to come to a conclusion, whereas we are the true self, the pure consciousness, the pure awareness, the self that does not do anything, but the self that just exists. For example, we will look at ourselves as being the flow state. When they talk about the flow state, look at ourselves as being the river. Does the river, when the river flows through the town, does the river say to itself, look at all the animals that I feed, look at all the birds and all of the trees that I support, look at all the villages that I take care of with my water? No, the river does none of these things. The river just does what it does, and that is what is called a flow state. When we do things from a perspective where we are not looking or seeking for any reward. However, that can only be achieved when we come to the understanding of who and what we truly are. Because the false self will always seek gratitude. Again, just like the river, just like the sea behind me, the sea does not say, oh, I am keeping the fish alive. Oh, I am making the boats be able to travel and go from place to place. No, the sea is not doing any of that. The sea does not have any feelings. The sea is neutral. Even when the sea does bad, and I shouldn't say bad because there is no bad. Even when the sea is really rough and there are storms and there's a hurricane or something of that sort, and it does some type of damage, the sea has no feeling about anything at all. The sea is a neutral thing, and that is what we need to come to the conclusion, that we are like the screen, we are like the wind, we are like the air that the wind and the clouds are pairing. So there is nothing for us to be attached to, because there is no us per se that exists to be attached to these things. So again, until this realization comes to the understanding of who we are, and we come to the flow like the river, flow like the sea, flow like the sky, we will always be disappointed. We will always seek. We will always be imprisoned, believing that we are the false self, and the false self will never, ever release us from this bondage. So hope that this video is another video. Hopefully this clears up the concept of having an understanding again, that we must come to a true understanding of who we are, because the false self itself will always keep us in some type of physical, mental, psychological, and emotional and financial bondage. So I'm going to end this video once again. Hopefully this has been an informative video in reference to coming to know thyself. And please go and share, like, and watch and subscribe, or to one of my other videos, and check those videos out as well, because these videos are all going to be complementary of each other, basically with the same basic message, is to come to an understanding of who yourself truly is. And if you do not come to that understanding, there will always be prison walls, prison of attachments of the mind, and prison walls, attachments of needs, desires, and wants, and lusts, and things that cannot actually dissipate until the true self actually dissipates, there will always be suffering. So with that being said, I would like to end this video. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will get out and talk to you guys with another video soon. Very shortly I will create another video, and until then, please stay safe, be strong, and know thyself, because you are the true self and there is no other self other than you. Triple P, and I'm out.
Oh.